Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to week 3. This week we're talking about the 6 rules of comma usage. Now for a lot of you, commas are going to be the bane of your existence. They're going to be the thing that probably in the past and maybe in the future have caused you or will cause you the most problems of any other form of punctuation. Hopefully some of the things we go over this week will help you both through this video and through some of the exercises you'll be doing this week. Will help you to understand commas a little more and understand how they work within a sentence and what they really do to change and to alter and to really help us relate the things that we're going to say within our writing. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so if you remember back to the beginning of our textbook, way back to page 2, you might remember the story of Chloe. Remember Chloe from the beginning of our textbook. Now, based on the example, when we left her, we didn't know if she was fired or not. We didn't know anything about that. So this week, let's talk about how a simple comma can mean the difference between her firing or her promotion. Right? So consider the directive that we explored there in week 1. Consider that directive came from a manager or CEO of the company, right? And came to the manager, I'm sorry, from the CEO. And in a poorly punctuated note, the CEO wrote, as we have in our example, fire Kevin and Chloe and Mike should get a promotion, right? Now the manager's a little confused at this point, right? Because the manager basically can assume that he should either fire Kevin and promote Mike, or he can assume that he should fire Kevin and promote Mike, but he doesn't really know what to do with Chloe because Chloe's there in the middle because we don't have the right commas in place. We don't know what to do with Chloe. So let's kind of look at how a comma can kind of clear these things up. Right? So in our first example, fire Kevin and Chloe and Mike should get a promotion. Right? So in this sense, right, now we have Chloe, poor Chloe, she's going to have this awful weekend. She's out of a job. She may have to move back in with her parents, or with her mom anyway, as we have in our thing here. She doesn't really, now all of a sudden she doesn't have a job because of where the comma is placed, and simply because of the way we've punctuated this sentence. Right? But what if we move the comma a bit? Let's help her out a little bit. Let's be nice to Chloe, right? Fire Kevin, and then Chloe and Mike should get a promotion. Fire Kevin, and Chloe and Mike should get a promotion. All right, still bad for Kevin. Obviously, Kevin is still out of a job. Kevin's still moving back in with his parents. But Chloe now, Chloe's going to be much happier. Chloe's actually getting a promotion now, simply from where we place the comma in this sentence. Simply, if the CEO had sent the message to the manager, basically saying, you know, with a comma in this construction that we have now, all of a sudden, Chloe's going to be much happier, have a much better life. Right? She's actually probably going to make more money, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of some of the ways that the commas work. Let's look at another example. Right? Obviously, you know, as we've been saying, knowing that where the comma goes can make a difference in the meaning of the sentence. So in this example, a woman without her man is nothing. Right? I mean, that's kind of a really dark statement, right? A woman without her man is nothing. Right? She's nothing without her man being around. But if we change the punctuation in the sentence just a little bit, if we put a couple commas in here, right? Now all of a sudden we've changed the entire meaning. In fact, it's a completely opposite meaning now. So now we're saying a woman without her man is nothing, right? So now all of a sudden, instead of the woman being nothing without the man, now the man's being nothing without the woman. And all we've done, the only change we've made to this is simply by placing some commas in the right place. This is how commas really affect meaning, and how when we're trying to say something in writing, we need to be really, we need to dedicate ourselves to understanding exactly what that comma is doing to our sentence, right? So let's move on to the our next slide, if you will. Okay, so out of all the punctuation marks, the comma can definitely be the most confusing. Unlike other punctuation marks, the comma has more than just a couple of rules associated with it. Actually, it has 6 specific rules, and that's what we're going to go over for this week. For the next few minutes, let's explore some of those uses. All right, so move on. All right, rule number 1, place a comma before a coordinating conjunction. We talked a little bit about in week 1 with the 8 parts of speech. We talked about coordinating conjunctions. I was talking about correlative conjunctions and subordinating conjunctions, or subordinate conjunctions. But this one is coordinating conjunctions. So as we said in the beginning, there are only a few coordinating conjunctions, and here's a really interesting acronym, if you will, for So okay, yeah, so our acronym is basically fanboys, right? It's an interesting way of seeing that. So we have for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so, right? We've changed a little bit about the way we did it in the beginning. We had maybe that little that mnemonic device as we talked about, but now we're talking about, we put it in kind of an acronym thing. So fanboys, right? So for and or sorry, for and nor, but, or, yet, so. Fanboys, right? So for example, let's see how a coordinating conjunction works, right? And why we need the comma in place, right? The rain is falling, complete sentence, right? I am soaked to the bone, complete sentence. But if we want to combine them to be in one sentence, we add that coordinating conjunction, we place that comma there. So the rain is falling and I am soaked to the bone. Remember, this is the big thing. Remember, you should only do this when combining independent clauses. So clauses that are parts of the sentence that can stand on their own as complete sentences. We do it only when we're combining independent clauses, right? So that's how the first rule works. And as you go through, we'll explore more. With the work this week, you'll explore more about how to use those coordinating conjunctions and how to understand those different independent clauses. We'll actually look at that later on in the class. But that's going to give you kind of a start with that. So the next rule, rule number 2, use commas to separate items in a series in dates and in addresses. Now, what going back or going to this is kind of this first one would be a serial comma, right? So we're doing items in a series, right? So I like eggs, bacon, and waffles, right? So we put those commas in there. So if we were to say I like eggs, bacon, and waffles, and with no commas, it doesn't really, I mean, it kind of speeds up the sentence and doesn't really flow quite as well. If we say I like eggs and then bacon and waffles, right, then we're combining the bacon and waffles as being a single thing, right? So we need to have those in the series. These are kind of unusual ways of using commas in the next couple of things, basically in addresses and in dates, right? So our next thing is we have January 27th, 2014. Note where the comma is in this place, right? It's between the two numbered sections, right? So when we're looking at it, that space obviously means something between the 27 and the 2014, but we put the comma there to further separate that, so we're not thinking that this is the whole month of January in the year 272014, right? And granted, that would be a really long way from now, and hopefully this video has long since disintegrated since then, or by then. But in this sense, yeah, we put it between those numbers, right? Note in the next construction, when we're talking about addresses, we're putting the comma not between numbers so much, but now we're putting the comma between words, right, to keep those as separate parts of the sentence. So in this one, we have the address here at Grantham University's main campus, right? We have 7200 Northwest 86th Street, comma, right, because the street and the city aren't going to be the same. Now it's Kansas City, right? Kansas City being the city, and then Missouri, right, being the state. Right, so we have three different things going on. We have the street address, then we have the city, and then we have the state that it's in. And notice there's not a comma between Missouri and the zip code, because that is where we have the letters for Missouri, the standing for Missouri, and then the zip code itself is a number, so we don't have to put that extra separation in there. We do put the space, but we don't put that extra separation. Hopefully that makes a little sense. Maybe a little confusing now, but those are just basic constructions that you'll understand as you go on. So let's move to the next rule. Rule number 3. Place a comma after an introductory word or word group, right? So this gets a little confusing, but you'll get it. So in this first one, first comma, I would like to make it very clear where I stand in all of this. That's the way we use it in an introductory word, right? So we're separating the first in here. We don't need that word, the first, right? It's something we could take out of the sentence, but we're adding it in there to give us this sense of, assuming that the next sentence will say second or secondly, I would like to explain something else, right? So it gives it that sense of order, right? So the second one, as we move on, beneath the floor, under your bed, there's a door to another world. Sorry, that's an introductory phrase. We don't really need the introductory phrase as part of this. That's actually what we call a prepositional phrase. It's telling us where something is located, right? But we could simply say there's a door to another world. We couldn't say beneath the floor under your bed and call that a complete sentence, right? That's actually an introductory phrase. That's what we call, the first part is called is going to be, because it's not a complete sentence, it's a subordinate clause or dependent clause, if you will. The second part is going to be an independent clause, because it could stand on its own. So introductory phrase. We'll understand this more and more as we go through. I know that some of this grammar stuff can be confusing, and this punctuation stuff can be a little confusing, but this is why we study it. This is why we learn to we go through this. The next part, because the door was left open, comma, the cat has gone missing. This is an introductory dependent clause, right? Once again, because the door was left open, this is not going to be a complete sentence. We could say the door was left open, but we put that subordinating conjunction, we talked about that a little bit before, or that subordinate conjunction, we put in the word because, we put that before, so now it's because the door was left open. Now something has to happen. What happened because the door was left open? Well, the cat has gone missing, right? The cat has gone missing could be its own sentence. We could just simply say the cat has gone missing, but now we've given it a reason in this sense. So because the door is left open, comma, the cat has gone missing. Hopefully that's starting to make a little more sense. Okay, so let's go on to rule number 4. All right, so rule number 4 is place commas around the name of the person spoken to. Right? So in this first construction, we could say, I don't know if you realize, George, you're getting on my nerves. Right? You can simply take the George out of it. It's a scoopable thing, as they say in the book. It's a scoopable concept. We could take that out of the sentence. We could simply say, I don't know if you realize you're getting on my nerves. Right? Then we wouldn't need the comma. But because we put the name George in the middle of this, it's a scoopable piece that we can take out. We put the commas around the name. Right? Again, let's look at the second thing. Betty, you look nice today. Right? We don't have to have the word Betty, but we're using Betty's name. So Betty looks nice today. We could simply say you look nice today, but now we're putting Betty in front of it, and so in that sense we're putting the comma. Right? Just like if you're writing an email and you say, you say John, comma, and then whatever your email says. I've noticed that throughout the week you have blah blah blah, whatever. But you put that comma after that name. And then the third one is where we're also doing that well in the same thing. We could simply say hello, but we want to put the name in here as well. We want to use Franklin's name, so we say hello, comma, Franklin. Franklin, of course, doesn't have to be part of the sentence, but it's really nice to use names. So hello, Franklin. We're just scooping. We could easily scoop that Franklin out of there, but because we've left it, we go ahead and add the comma in there. Hopefully between this and the book, that's starting to make some more sense. Let's move on to rule number 5. Once again, we're still talking about the scoopable concepts, right? We're still talking about those pieces of the sentence we don't need. So in rule number 5, place commas around expressions that interrupt the flow of the sentence, right? So these things, in our example here, we could simply say the movie review was overly harsh, but we're saying, we're adding the I thought in this. I thought doesn't have to be part of the sentence, but because we've included it, we're putting those commas around it. We're being able to scoop that out of the sentence, right? So now it's the movie review, I thought, was overly harsh, right? So let's see how that works. The second example we have here, I was, like always, too shy to dance. Right? We don't need the like always. Once again, we can say I was too shy to dance, but we're adding that modifier, we're adding that extra thing in the sentence to make the sentence, to give the sentence a little more depth. It is once again a scoopable concept, right? So we could easily pull it out, but now we say I was, like always, too shy to dance. Note how that works. See how we can pull that out and why we need to and why we do it that way. Technically in this construction, that's called an appositive. You don't need to remember that word, but in case you ever hear, you need to put commas around your appositives, that's what an appositive is. It's a scoopable concept, something we can take out of the sentence. All right. Let's move on to rule number 6 and our final rule about commas. Okay, so in rule number 6, we're still talking about scoopable concepts. Both rules 4, 5, or I'm sorry, not both because we have more than 2, but all the rules 4, 5, and 6 all deal with scoopable concepts, things we don't need in the sentence, but we like them there because it adds more meaning and more depth to our sentences, right? So in rule number 6, we have the rule is place commas around additional information that is not needed, right? So we could simply say in our first one, my 55 Chevy is falling apart, right? But we want to identify that particular 55 Chevy. Maybe we own more than one. Maybe we just want to give more description of that. But now we say my 55 Chevy, the one with the dented fender, is falling apart. Does that make sense? Right? So we don't need that additional information, but we're putting it in there to give a little more meaning to our sentence, to help clarify a little more about what we're talking about. So in this sense, put those commas around that, once again, that appositive, that thing that we don't need as part of the sentence, but we put in there because we like it there. It gives more definition to that particular 55 Chevy in this construction. All right, so our next example. Stephen's uncle, the short one, is always showing up unexpectedly. Now we can simply say that Stephen's uncle is always showing up unexpectedly, right? We could easily say that, but we want to identify which uncle it is. Maybe we could say Stephen's uncle Bernard is always showing up unexpectedly, and we could go back to that name construction to where we're separating out that name. But in this case, we're just identifying this particular one as the short uncle, right? Maybe Stephen has several uncles. This one just happens to be the short one. We're putting it in there for clarification purposes. It's a scoopable concept, so we're able to, we want to leave it in, but we could scoop it out, so we're putting commas around it. Stephen's uncle, the short one, is always showing up unexpectedly. So hopefully as we go through this, rules 1 through 6, let's just kind of backtrack. I'm just going to kind of go back through the slides, if you will, and we're just going to do them really, really quickly, all the way back to part 1. So, rule 1, place the comma before coordinating conjunction. Make sure you remember that, right? Make sure you remember the fanboys part. Rule 2, use commas to separate items in a series in dates and in addresses, right? Make sure that you use that third or that second comma. I like eggs, bacon, I like eggs, comma, bacon, comma, and waffles, right? We're putting that, we're making sure we add that comma before that conjunction word there, that and. Right, and we're also separating out eggs and bacon. Of course, the same with dates, January 27th, comma 2014, to keep those numbers separate. And then in the address, 7200 Northwest 86th Street, comma Kansas City, comma Missouri, and the zip code 64153, because we're keeping those pieces separate. So keep them in separate parts of those series. Right. Rule number 3. Place a comma after introductory word or word group. So if we have a list of things, we're saying, first, I'd like to explain this. Secondly, I'd like to do this. And third, and finally, I'd like to say this. Right. So in that, we're putting that we're putting that comma around that introductory word or word group. Same thing with the second. We've got a prepositional phrase, which you'll understand more as we go through. But beneath the floor, under the bed, under your bed, comma, there's a door to another world. So we're separating out that introductory prepositional phrase. And then the third one, we're saying because the door was left open, comma, the cat has gone missing. We're separating out those two pieces of the sentence as far as that goes. So, and then rule number 4, place commas around the name of person being spoken to. Of course, we're taking out George, Betty, and Franklin. We're saying George, Betty, and Franklin are not really things we need in the sentence, but we're using the names because we want to be specific about who we're talking to, because the power of names as far as using people's names is important, because we're directly addressing these people or whatever. We're putting that in there. The same thing could work in this is if I could say, I don't know if you realize, but your Uncle George is getting on my nerves, right? So then we would put, we'd actually say your Uncle George rather than just the name to put those commas around. Same thing with Betty and the Franklin. We've already gone over that though. So rule number 5, as a recap, place commas around expressions that interrupt the flow of the sentence. The movie review, I thought, we don't need that part, but the movie review I thought was overly harsh, or I was, like always, too shy to dance. Obviously we don't need the like always, but we like it in there because it gives us a little more description. And then, of course, rule number 6, real quickly, place commas around additional information that is not needed. Place them around those positives. My 55 Chevy, the one with the dented fender, is falling apart. Or Stephen's uncle. And which Stephen's uncle, which of Stephen's uncles are we talking about? The short one. So Stephen's uncle, the short one, is always showing up unexpectedly. Note how those rules go together. So those are our 6 basic rules of comma, or really our 6 rules of comma usage. So go through those, practice those as you go through your work this week. Try and identify those. You don't have to have those done perfectly. Commas are the thing, like we said in the beginning, that cause a lot of trouble when it comes to punctuation, when it comes to those things. So, but just as we begin to really explore independent clauses, and as we said, appositives, if we understand these scoopable concepts and we understand all these things, we start to understand where those commas work, why those commas are important, and as you go on with your writing, as you start working on that, you'll start practicing those ideas, and of course you'll work with your instructor, and your instructor will help you to put those together. So once again, as always, let your instructor know if you have any comments, questions, or concerns. If there's things about this video that we did that maybe we could do better, we would really like to know that. If you have any questions, if this video didn't explain things thoroughly enough, you can always ask your instructor. Maybe you have some particular things you'd like to ask them. If you have any concerns, if you're still worried about this, which I mean, and that's understandable, but if you're still worried about this, even after you go through all the things and you say, I still don't really get this concept, ask your instructor. Your instructor is one of the best resources you have. Go ahead and ask him or her to help you out, and they'll be more than happy to step up and help you. So hopefully you've learned a little bit through this video. Hopefully you'll learn even more through the exercises and the lectures this week, and have a great week, and we'll see you next week in these videos. All right, thanks, bye.